Hi guys, welcome back. Today you join me in the 2023 Hyundai IONIQ 6, a car that shares its platform with the IONIQ 5, Kia EV6 and EV9, and the Genesis GV60, but in many ways is more interesting and more fun to drive. But I'm here to see whether the trade-offs in terms of practicality are actually worth it. But there's a reason why this won Car of the Year, and why the platform that it shares is just smashing that at the moment. A load of them keep winning awards, and it's clear to see why. Thankfully, trim levels are quite simple. There's only two to choose from, and the base model has some generous spec as standard. It's called the Premium and starts from around £47,000, and it includes things like the 20-inch alloys as standard across the range, as well as the 12.3-inch dual displays. You get front and rear heated seats and front and rear LED lights with this pixel style on the back, and of course loads of safety tech as standard, including lane keep assist and highway driving assist and all that kind of thing. The standard spec sheet is absolutely huge, and you can step up to the ultimate model, which starts from around £51,000, and that includes things like a Bose audio system, which is surprisingly good, a sunroof, ventilated option for the seats, remote parking assist, which is really cool because you can use the key to drive the car in and out of spaces when they're tight, which is a nice little gimmick to have, and also a surround view camera and blind spot monitoring cameras, both of which I think are some of the class leaders. Drivetrain options there are two, and they both come with a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery here in the UK. The one I'm in today is the entry-level model. It's rear-wheel drive only, 225 horsepower, and good for a range of an impressive 329 miles. And that is on these standard 20-inch alloys as well. It will go even further if you were to fit some smaller ones. Then the more powerful car is 321 brake horsepower and has a range of 323 miles, and that one is all-wheel drive for a much brisker 0 to 60. The only option you can spec on the higher-end cars is full digital mirrors, at a cost of around £995. And personally, I probably wouldn't like that myself, so I would leave it off. And so being built on that familiar platform, it means that you get all of the charging benefits too. So 220 kilowatt charging maximum, and on supported fast chargers, that means 10 to 80% in just 18 minutes. Very impressive. Not that nearly 340 miles of range is anything to sniff at on an EV anyway. And my average through the week of having the car has been around 3.6 to 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour, which isn't too bad at all, really. So let's talk styling then. Well, I actually think it's quite an interesting looking thing. From the back, it looks a little bit like the old Citroen DS cars from back in the day. Interestingly, I also think it looks a little bit Porsche as well. There's something about that kind of swooping roofline and the way the back comes together. It's not for everyone though. I mean, I've always been on the fence about it, and the only time I really said wow was when it actually showed up at my door. In pictures, I don't think it really does it justice. You'll be watching this and you'll be thinking, maybe I'm not too sure. I'd say reserve judgment until you see one in the flesh, because it is a bit different. It looks especially great in this matte gravity gold, which is an optional paint choice. Although with paint, you don't really have many options. There's a couple of metallics. It's like black, grey and red, and that's pretty much your lot. It definitely divides opinion though. I asked people in a poll on my Instagram, do they think it's pretty or do they think it's weird? And it got literally 50-50 split across something like 30 or 35 votes. That says it all to me. But I have had lots of compliments on it and a lot of people who are interested in poking around it, so it's obviously unique. But the thing is when buying is you have to remember that it is pretty much the same car underneath and inside as the IONIQ 5, which is a much more practical shell and a bit more reserved in terms of styling. I think the only reason you'd have one of these is because it is marginally more dynamic to drive and also just a bit more practical. What I do absolutely love is the lights. You've got LEDs front and rear across the range, including the pixel light bar across the back. Looks really cool, although it would be nice to have some dynamic lighting effects. Although there are some dynamic lighting effects on the dashboard with a little ambient lighting strip that kind of pulses when you start and end your use of the car, and there's some ambient lighting in the doors and stuff as well. It's nothing absolutely spectacular, but overall the package is just quite nice, and the exterior design I think really suits the paintwork. I'm not sure I'd quite like it as much in a normal metallic. There's not many other cars out there now that have this body style, so it really does stand out. I thought I preferred the front to the back as well, but I think now it's actually the other way round. Yeah, looks are a tricky one. I do think it's impressive in the flesh. I just don't love the way it looks, if that makes sense. The sort of satin finish of this matte paint though against the diamond cut wheels is pretty sensational in direct sunlight. And the colour, I know it's called gravity gold, it does look more silver, but it has that kind of champagne tint to it. In certain lights you can tell it's almost like a rose goldy colour. Step inside the IONIQ 6 and you get the usual Kia, Hyundai stuff. So loads of great tech that's relatively reliable, loads of driving assist features and safety features and stuff like that. You've got your collision assist and you've got your highway driving assist on the one button on the steering wheel, which I love. You just press it once and the car will just steer itself on the motorway. It's brilliant. You can turn it off with the click of a button, no messing about in the menus. There's also quite a few physical controls in terms of your layout. So you've got some on the steering wheel for your volume and stuff like that, and you can kind of control some of the stuff that you see on screen. And also your 12.3-inch displays are both standard across the whole range, so you can enjoy all of that tech. Also, you get the standard features like drive profiles, which you can select. So if you've got people sharing the car, it's really easy to switch between your preferences. And you've got things like quiet mode, which turn off the rear speakers if the kids are in the back asleep. Really good stuff. When you go for a tunnel even, it will shut off the vents to make sure the air inside isn't polluted. Really cool. The overall design in here looks pretty space age, which I do quite like, and there's loads of space in the front as well. You've got kind of a floating center console, which normally compromises on quality in cars like this, but it is really solid in this one. I'm impressed. And the only use of really horrible, cheap, crappy plastics is right down here, which is a little bit annoying when you've got the parking brake down here and also your mirror controls. But do you know what? It can be forgiven. It's not too bad, and the door materials are all nice to touch too. The displays are bright and crisp and responsive. The only thing I'm not too keen on is the one in the middle does not really angle towards me. It kind of looks a bit further away. So it's a bit of a faff to use. There's no alternate option to interact with the infotainment. You can't use like a click wheel or anything like that. You have to reach over and faff about, which obviously can be frustrating and dangerous when driving. Herein lies the problem of trying to do this while you're driving and stabbing at the screen without any other kind of form of input. But it's easy enough to use. It doesn't use their latest graphics from their new Kona and stuff like that, which is a bit of a shame, but it still looks pretty good, and there's a few different themes and things that you can choose from. The actual interface is really easy to use and get used to, and I always compliment it in all of these cars. As I said, these plastic wings up here would be used for the screens if you've got the digital mirrors. Again, don't really see the need to spend the money on that. And in the center, you've got some physical controls for your infotainment system, like shortcuts and things like that. The star buttons you can program to whatever you want. But frustratingly, the climate control in this isn't as good as in their other cars. It's all capacitive touch and there's no response to it at all. You can't tell what you're prodding when. It's dangerous to use when you're driving. It's frustrating and I hate it passionately. It's not the worst I've ever used, don't get me wrong, but it's just not, there's no reason why they couldn't have included a little toggle for your temperature at least. Also, weirdly, all of the controls for the windows are in the center, a bit like in some small hatchbacks, and there's no controls here on the door, just this massive grille for the Bose speaker system. Now, it takes a bit of getting used to. I personally don't like it. I'm sure you just adapt to it, but I'm not the biggest fan. I'd much prefer down here to have a click wheel for the infotainment. Also, it means that your parking brake and your mirror controls are down here by your knee, which are completely out of sight and annoying to reach. The seats are nice though. These ones are the leather ones and they have a full recline. There's one button that basically does that and you can lay right back, which is really, really nice. You've got decent electronic controls, but some more thigh support would be a little bit nice, and maybe some four-way lumbar. I also wish there was a little bit more adjustment in the headrest, but overall, they're comfortable enough for a long journey, and I wouldn't have too many complaints. I just think that the GV60 definitely has nicer seats. You've also got some controls on the passenger one there for if there's someone in the back and they want to move it forward. It's standard USB-A up there with a wireless charger, which is a bit odd, but it's still a practical space. You've got loads of space underneath it because of the floating center console. Cup holders, which aren't the best in design, unfortunately. They don't grip the cups very well, but you do have plenty of space in this center area here, including 2 USB-C chargers. The glove box is quite a practical thing as well. It's actually like a sliding drawer, which I think is quite good because a lot of these manufacturers are now putting these terrible little cubbies in that aren't useful for anything, but that is better. The door bins, whilst long, aren't very deep, so they've not been the best for holding my bottle of water. Overall though, you've got plenty of space up here in the front. The place that suffers is the rear, just because of that swooping roofline. I've only got a little bit of headroom back there, and because the floor pan sits quite high because of the battery pack, you do get very limited thigh support, like your knees are quite high up and you feel like you're perching on top of the seat rather than actually sitting in it, which is a bit of a shame. And also, it just means that a long journey is really impractical for those rear passengers. You do, however, have a flat floor back there, which is obviously nice, and you've got some USB charging and stuff like that, so not the end of the world, and you do have heated seats, which is a nice addition to have. It's just that I can't help but thinking if I was in an IONIQ 5, it would be a much more practical space. And the same goes for the boot as well. You do have ISOFIX points back there, and you do also have a bit of a armrest. The seats do fold down to accommodate some more space in the boot, But that's not really saying a lot, to be honest. I'm sure there's probably some engineering or styling reason why they decided to go for like a saloon style boot rather than a hatchback, but it does make loading this thing really impractical. The space itself is quite deep, but not very tall at all, so it makes fitting objects in there really difficult. I couldn't fit an office chair in there, so I ended up folding the seats down and kind of cramming it in the back. It was really awkward. And in terms of that space, it's not very wide to load, and there is a big load lip, so putting suitcases in there would prove a bit of a chore. There is, however, a frunk and also a bit of space under the floor in the boot to store some charging cables, which is a nice addition. In terms of visibility and seating position, it's not too bad. There's quite a bit of adjustment in this seat, as I say. I prefer a higher driving position in this, and you do get quite a high driving position because of where the floor is, and also because you can get the seat quite high. So it doesn't feel like a low-slung sports car, which I quite like. But also you can get it low if you want to. Now, visibility, you've got loads of visibility out of the sides, and visibility out the back isn't too bad, to be honest. There's no massive C-pillar in your way, but it is quite a shallow window, so it almost as though you're looking down on some hatchbacks. But again, loads of sensors in here. You've got your blind spot cameras in this model, so what's to complain about? Overall, I'd say the ride is nothing to complain about at all. It does quite a good job of soaking up bumps, and it's not too firm, unlike some of the rivals. It's not exactly a soft car, but it's got the balance right, I would say. It's also relatively quiet in here, and I don't get too much wind noise from the pillars or anything like that. And the power delivery isn't jarring in any way, shape or form. They've really tuned it well to feel like the throttle response is decent. And you can adjust it on the fly with the paddles like in most of their other EVs. So at the moment I've got it in level 1, which has a tiny bit of regen. You can free it up completely on the paddle to make it completely linear in terms of the delivery. Or you can put it right the way down, level 2, level 3, into max, which is I-pedal, which is single pedal driving mode. So when I let off, it will brake to a complete stop, a bit like a Tesla. So that's great. But for me, I quite like driving it in level 1. That feels the most natural to me. But the fact that you can change that on the fly is excellent, and I always praise all of their cars for that. Even the braking feels quite natural for an EV. When I press quite firmly, you do feel it kind of bottom out a little bit and you get that kind of judder, but it's not the worst by EV standards at all. It doesn't feel too spongy. In normal operation, I think you get used to it very, very quickly, and you'd have quite a bit of confidence in the braking ability. So I'm now kind of chucking it down a country road here. And in terms of the driving, it's not too bad at all. The actual dynamics of the car, I really like this rear-wheel drive model, actually, to be honest. The power is enough for most people, and although you might want a little bit of extra shove, in normal driving mode, the power delivery is really nice. In this sport mode, it does sharpen that throttle a little bit and let you have a bit more fun. I've got traction off at the moment as well, and even then it doesn't kick the back out too much. But, you know, it's not like the GV60 where it has like a drift mode and all that kind of thing. So it's not like one of those cars where you're going to be struggling to control it or anything. It is quite practical in that sense. I'm in sport mode currently with traction on. Let's turn traction into limited modes just to see if I can get any exciting action around here. It does feel relatively well planted, and you can really tell that it's like got a low centre of gravity, which is nice. And I actually quite enjoy this rear-wheel drive model because it's just that little bit more it's that little bit more engaging than the four-wheel drive. Acceleration off the line, it's not going to blow you away in this model, but it doesn't ever spin up or anything like that. It puts the power down really well. In front of me at the moment, I've got it in sport mode, so I can see the torque meter dancing up and down with me, which is good fun as well. I've got all the artificial noise and stuff turned off at the moment, but yeah, I mean, there is a tiny bit of delay in steering input, but not tragically so. You can still have some fun with it. And although there's not an awful lot of texture through the wheel, you can feel that it is very heavily electronically assisted. I still don't think that it is a deal breaker. I still think you would have plenty of fun in this car just because it's practical. You know, it's not going to kick the tail out and go wild, but it's also not too tame. You can still feel the shove of torque when you need it, and of course that all-wheel drive model will be significantly faster as well. I do find though, of course, in some times that the electronic systems can be a little bit nannying. Sometimes it beeps at me too frequently for straying lane and things like that when it doesn't actually need to, and sometimes you get the collision assist act a little bit too quickly and it's just beeping incessantly at you about speed warnings and things like that, and you can tweak that in the settings. But again, it's just one of those things that we're going to start seeing more and more on cars. It's just that the implementation on the Hyundais and also the Kias is just a little bit excessive in my opinion sometimes, but it's nice to know that all those systems are there looking after you. So this car as well has a drag coefficient of 0.21, and basically what that means is it's been designed in such a way that it's so sleek and aerodynamic that it's really efficient and cuts through the air. It's even better than the Tesla Model 3, which is class leading as it is. And it also means that you don't get loads of wind noise and lots of buffeting from the front, so it does feel really slick in motion. And even on this rough terrain, it's not too jittery, which is good. I do just feel like it's a little bit more sharp than the IONIQ 5, just because of maybe that slightly lower ride height and things like that. So if I was to chuck a Kia EV6 or a GV60 out of here, it would feel a little bit sloppy just because it's a little bit bigger and heavier. In terms of just the way you drive it, just cruising around, even not this kind of dynamic sprinting through the countryside stuff that I'm doing right now, even just the cruising along and the way the brakes feel and the way the ride is and the way the power is delivered, it's one of my favourite EVs that I've ever driven, honestly. And that's not just me bigging it up, like it genuinely is that good. And I can see why it's won so many awards, not only for design, but also just for the implementation of the tech and the way it feels to use. Yeah, I think you're going to have a little bit more fun in terms of the texture through the wheel and the dynamic feel of a BMW i4. And you're going to enjoy the driver's display more on something from Volkswagen Audi Group with the full maps and all that kind of thing. But this gives you enough information, and the driving experience for me as a daily driver is what most consumers care about, and this really excels at that. I would only say, if you're looking at one of these and you think that's lovely, maybe think slightly more practically. Look at the IONIQ 5, and the EV6 is a very similar car, unless you're desperate for this one that is slightly nicer to drive and also just a bit better looking in some people's opinion. And there's also the EV6 and the GV70, both very good cars, and I've got reviews of both of those on my channel, so feel free to check those out. I really appreciate the support, so please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I enjoy all your comments, so please let me know what you want to see in the comments below. If you want to check out the best lease deals on this car, check out my link in the description below to compare those. And also thanks to Hyundai for sending me out the car. I really do appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.